Ready graphics? Ready theme?
Good evening. For your information tonight.
People often ask me why I don't watch myself on TV or movies and stuff. I don't watch myself when I do plays. What difference does it make? What matters to me is how you feel coming off the set. If you feel like you've done everything you can, great. If you didn't, why not?
Hi, it's Lauren.
Hey, it's Jessie.
And welcome to another interview episode of the Murphy Brown Podcast.
Yes, it's a really fun interview for us in particular because it's a nice mashup of Murphy Brown and another show we mention a lot. You may have heard of The West Wing.
Yes. If you ever wanted a Murphy Brown West Wing mashup, this is it.
Welcome to this interview.
If you aren't aware already, our interview today is Richard Schiff, Emmy-winning actor from The West Wing.
Also known as Toby Ziegler. But more exciting for us is that he was a guest star on Murphy Brown.
Yes, which makes him perfect for this podcast.
Indeed.
Now, during the interview, he mentions the producers at the time. It was season 6. We'll talk more about it during the interview, but just to give you some reference.
Yes, so the producers at the time were Stephen Peterman and Gary Danzig, as well as Corby Siamis was credited. And if this gets you super pumped to see a lot of Richard Schiff, you don't just have to watch old episodes of Murphy Brown and The West Wing because he is in a current show.
Yes, you can find Richard on The Good Doctor on ABC, which is returning this fall for season 2.
So please enjoy this episode. Again, please do not forget to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Murphy Brown Pod.
You can also check out show notes and extra information about each episode or backlog on our website at murphybrownpod.com. And please don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. It really helps the podcast.
All right. So without further ado, please enjoy the episode. Bye.
Bye. Will the mystery guest please sign in?
Hi, my name is Brad Pitt.
Oh, Brad, you're looking good.
Nice
You
to
look
meet
great.
you guys. No, this is Richard Schiff of Murphy Brown fame.
Yes. Well, you are famous to us for multiple reasons, but before we get into your very long and still going career, we'd love to hear a little bit about your origin stories as an artist, director, and actor.
It's too long and complicated. It's a very circuitous route I took to get to this desk in this moment talking to you guys. But I don't even know how to begin to describe it, but I wasn't 4 years old wanting to be on Broadway dancing and singing in musicals. That wasn't my path. But I was always very curious about why, as a kind of lonely, unhappy child, I was so taken by plays and movies and even music and put into a trance. And I loved being in that trance. I think it's why other people who are struggling turn to heroin, to be honest. To me, it was the trance of being taken by a story that elevated me out of whatever hole I was in. And scientifically was just very curious as to why, sometimes, I'd be taken into this trance and sometimes not. And even if it was the same director and the same actors in a similar kind of movie, you know. So I was always very curious about that. That's all I can say. And so, in my stumbling journey through schools and various, private schools and public schools in New York and, going to night school to get out of high school, cause I didn't like school too much, and then going to City College and leaving there and living in Colorado and, coming back. And I kind of fell backwards into the theater program there and then fell harder backwards into the professional training program. And there was, no rhyme or reason for it. I took a theater class and lo and behold, we were rehearsing plays, from Arthur Miller and whatever. And all of a sudden, I was talking to girls. So that was a good
common theme we hear.
So being pathologically quiet and reclusive, that was a good thing, I thought. And then I took an acting class from a woman named Carol Thompson, who had been on Broadway, directed by Ulu Grosbard, which impressed me because I had seen Ulu Grosbard direct American Buffalo with Robert Duvall and John Savage and my favorite character actor, Kenneth McMillan of those days. And, but she was a horrible teacher. And then, just so happened to be being directed by the directing class in the theater department. And the teacher of that class had told me that there was a professional training program at City College called the Davis Center for Performing Arts, and I should audition. So I had a friend, my best friend, who actually was a roommate named Stephen Fetter. He knew all about this stuff. He was, even though he was a high school basketball player at Forest Hills High School and a tennis freak, he was first and foremost a theater loon. And me and his girlfriend took him to Chorus Line, the original Chorus Line. We could only afford standing room tickets for his birthday, and then the damn record played in our apartment for the next 4 months every time we came home. So I asked him, I said, they want me to audition. And just for fun, he would always say, you should be an actor, blah, 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 for whatever reason. And, he gave me this audition, from Jules Feiffer's, Little Murders, which is a play that I remember. Jules Feiffer was a cartoonist and a playwright. And very oddly enough, I told the story to his daughter, Hallie Pfeiffer, who is now a playwright, whose play I might do sometime soon. And, she was very tickled by the story. Anyway, I did this monologue. I had no idea what I was doing. These two guys were judging me. Every now and then they would laugh and I would stop and look up and, what are you doing? I'm trying to read this thing. And when it was over, one of them said, why are you so nervous? And I said, because I've never done this before. And he said, well, why do you want to be an actor? And I said, I don't want to be an actor. And he said, well, what are you doing here? This is a training program. It's 3 years of your life. Why do you want to? And I said, I don't know. I just, I don't know. It might help. I write. Maybe it'll help my writing. So he became my mentor, and his name was Earl Gister, who later went on to run the Yale School of Drama for about 14 years. And I'd come from Carnegie Mellon, the president of professional training program throughout the country, and had auditioned many thousands of people before in that capacity. And about 2 years later, I was sitting in his office and we were talking about life in theater and art and all these things. And I would get a big tub of really bad coffee from the cafeteria and I'd smoke his Lucky Strikes with him. And, we'd sit there and talk. And at one point I went, why did you let me into this program? There's all these kids from the High School of Performing Arts who showed up in tights. And then me with, because of all the years of doing this, I'd never had anyone in the interview be so honest. So I thought I'd take a chance. So that's how I backdoored my way into this thing. And I was still just curiosity. I didn't really want to act. I didn't like acting in his class. It was too harrowing. It was too nerve-wracking. But I loved studying what other people were doing. And I ended up directing a play in that program, which was quite a moving experience for me for many reasons, which is too long to get into. And then, started out, and then the first audition after college, I got the part. I went for a small part, ended up with the lead role in a beautiful play by James Baldwin called Lucia, Mr. Charlie. Get paid $35 a show, which was shocking. My first job was a paying job. And I had to get to the theater in Fort Greene, Brooklyn, about 8 hours before curtain at noon, so that I could begin trying to de-stress and relax because I was so full of fear. And while the production was very successful and people were asking me to join their companies and so on, I just thought this business of acting is too painful. So I abandoned it. And pursued other things. So I stage managed a little bit, I assistant directed, and then I started my own theater company in New York. And was directing plays. And that's what I did throughout my 20s. And it wasn't until later on, and it really came about because I was curious why certain actors from this particular teacher were directable in real life. But directable was the key. And he knew me because I was hiring all his actors, all his graduates. And he invited me to talk to him, and I talked to him, and he goes, you're an interesting fellow, you should take my class. I'm like, I don't want to be an actor, you should take my class anyway. So I took this 2-year program with William Esser, who was an
Yeah, wonderful teacher.
He's now considered a master teacher, and was then as well, I guess. And that's what began the journey back into acting. And my classmates wanted to produce a play. They knew I had hundreds of plays, for my theater company, and we picked a couple of plays. I was the lead in one of them, a comedy, a farce, and it was a big hit off Broadway, and moved it to off Broadway. And, I began the ridiculous, pursuit of this, silly business. And I was in my 30s, so I started very late as far as acting.
Yeah, we hear that a lot from what, we would consider ourselves character actors, and I think you would too, that tend to start late in life, but then you have a longer career.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about career. This is the one thing I never thought about.
That's probably helpful.
Yeah, I think so.
It doesn't interest me. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have like a picture. Mm-hmm. At one point, I got an agent at some point, and you need a picture. I don't have one. Well, go get them made. I went, no. And I said, here, this is a wedding picture. Take this. He says, so it's, the idea was absurd to me to walk around, and I had heard about, my girlfriend of 9 years in New York, her mother had found a theater in the street in New York, which is where they did Shakespeare and Moliere in a flatbed truck and took it all around New York. And she was quite a phenomenal lady. And she was from England. She married a GI. She was going to be the next great Shakespearean ingenue. And she married a GI from Tennessee, half Cherokee, moved to the Lower Side. He was a union organizer. And she founded theater in the street. Raul Julia, Billy D. Williams got their start.
Yeah.
She used to use, she had people like Morris Farnowski and Phoebe Brand from the group theater. And the pictures and the artifacts in her apartment were phenomenal. And were riveting. These people hanging from fire escapes, and even the dogs were riveted by whatever, if there was a rat in the corner, he was riveted. Everyone was riveted to the stage. Photographs were amazing. And, what was the point of this? Why did I go into her? I forget.
I don't know. It's all
just
fascinating. Yeah.
Just talking about not thinking about career ahead that way.
Say again?
Oh, you were talking about not looking at career trajectory, but
as opposed to just doing the work.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, and she had a stack of resumes in her closet, along with photographs and manuscripts and all those things. And I went through them, and I found, I had already directed through much of my 20s, and so I'd used to getting these silly pictures and resumes with people. This is me with a mustache, and this is me with a hat and a mustache. This is me with a hat, glasses, and a mustache, all with the same smile. And
little doctor's stethoscope.
I found one of those resumes, and it had, this is me in a mustache, this is me with glasses, blah blah blah, and it had all the leading angry men of that era. Look Back in Anger and John Osborne and all of these, and I looked at it, and these were all lies. And I was used to catching the lies of actors would make up these theaters and make up these, thought of as, and these were all lies. You could tell. So it was something studio theater, and all the great young, angry leading man roles, And the picture in the front, you know who it was? It was Robert De Niro.
Oh, cool.
Oh, I love stories like that.
Later, that Robert De Niro used to pound the streets. Like even when he was doing Mean Streets with Scorsese, from lunch he would go find other film sets and drop off his resume. And Dustin Hoffman. I mean, I've worked with a lot of these guys later on in life, and Martin Sheen and Al Pacino. They were all objective, goal oriented and driven. And Al and Martin who clean bathrooms together at the Living Theater, Julian Exting. And Dustin Hoffman, you can tell from Tootsie, understood what it was, what being an actor meant to him. And I'd never had that. I just curiosity. It wasn't until we got pregnant that I got serious about making money.
Well, that makes sense. That suddenly we're looking more at the numbers than just the art itself.
And that's when it was, that's when the stupidity kind of got knocked out of me, because when I first came out here, I was somewhat enraged by the process of, dancing in front of a bunch of suits that sold soap for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like when you said soap, it reminded me of an interview I just actually watched with you, because I know, skipping ahead a little bit, that you had to be convinced to go to your West Wing test, right? Because you had not showed up for a bunch of tests.
I had passed on, I finally figured out the audition thing, and I was getting kind of everything at one point. And it took me a while. As I said, I was very maddened by the process at first, and then I kind of figured it out. And so the year before, there were 4 different shows that wanted to sign me for test deals, and I guess I agreed to the test, and then I wouldn't show up. Yeah, because I would imagine myself, spending 7 years with, one of them was a superintendent of a New York building with all these kids. That was the sitcom. And the kids pick on the super, and I just imagine getting hit with spitballs for 6 years. I was on the ABC building, and I just couldn't go in. I wasn't like I was being rude. I just couldn't physically get myself to do it. And I didn't know that until that moment. I just went, and I thought, let me just take this moment by moment, which is the way we should take things, I think. And, they got so mad they were going to give me the job anyway.
What?
That was it.
You have a lot of good luck, it seems.
And then one of those shows was for NBC. And so the following year, West Wing came along, and I knew it was a great pilot. I didn't know Aaron except from Sports Night. And, to be honest, wasn't crazy about that show. I appreciated the work in it, but didn't really have a desire to watch it much. And, but I knew the show was great, and I had worked with Tommy Schlamme before, but there was a movie that I was supposed to be doing with Wim Wenders, and they conflicted, and I was asked, which one do you want to do? They both happened. I said, well, the network will never hire me because I didn't show up last year, and they got really angry. So NBC will never hire me, so there's no doubt I'd rather do the movie anyway. And then the movie fell through, and then I went to the auditions kind of thinking this is silly because they hate me. But Tommy was very loving and very encouraging, and I told him I might not show up to the test, and he says, "Yeah, I heard." And I said, and he says, "I hope you do." And it was very sweet. And so I did, really, because of him. And then I think on the way out that day, I saw Allison Janney waiting to audition for this. Was another round of auditions. And she didn't know me, but I'd seen her in some plays in New York and off Broadway, and of course was a fan of hers from a couple of movies by then. Primary Colors, I remember.
Yeah.
So I went, oh, wait a second. These guys hire her. They'll never hire her. But if they hire her, then these guys know what they're doing. But they'll never hire her. I didn't think they were smart enough to hire her.
Fair.
Turns out I was wrong, and rightfully so, and luckily so.
Well, I guess going back to 1994,
Indeed,
since that's the focus of most of the podcast and the interview. What do you remember about maybe your first audition for Murphy Brown, or just being on set? I mean, I know it was a while ago, but what are your memories of that?
I remember every detail of it.
Great.
Phenomenal.
You're the perfect guest.
That was the reason that was the year my son was conceived.
Good year.
And this was, I'm pretty sure, before the crowning of the head, before he came out. And I had also busted my knee. I had the ACL snapped playing baseball, and I had a choice of getting surgery, which would be like in those days a 5 or 6 month rehab. Nowadays it's you're back on your feet 2 days later, but in those days it was a struggle. Like very few athletes ever came back from that injury back then. Now they come back from it all the time. So, and then I went in deciding about this on this audition for Murphy Brown, and this was at a time when I was beginning to get the auditions, but I was in some pain, and I think I was on crutches.
Wow.
And there was something about that audition that actually triggered another level of understanding of what this acting thing was all about. Because I was so not focused, but I was aware of something else going on in my body, like the pain in my knee, that it freed up the work.
Mm-hmm.
And the work just flew out. And I remember the guys, and I won't remember their names, but the producers right away were like, "Are you free next week? Are you available? Listen, what's happening with the leg? If you get surgery, we'll figure it out. We'll make the guy, be on crutches, whatever. They were desperate to have me do this role, which didn't happen to me very often. But there was something about what happened in that audition, quite accidentally, which I've never forgotten. And it's hard for me to describe, but it's some physical thing where my mind was busy on something else. And it's what an independent activity might do.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to describe it, but I've never forgotten it. And so I got the job like immediately and went on set, and I don't think I was on crutches anymore. But I was still limping. And I kept that feeling that I had in the audition, and it was, I remember the other cast people. I remember Candice Bergen stopping and at the read-through, just kind of stopping and looking at me like I was some kind of Martian. I took that as a compliment because I don't. Years later, I ran into her and she had no recollection of me. So I didn't make that much impact. But I remember people reacting, and I clocked when people really reacted to something. It wasn't what I was worried about, but when they really reacted to something, I clocked it and said, okay, I'm clicking into something here. Let me make sure I keep it. And then I remember my girlfriend, even though we were pregnant, my fiance, I guess you could say, and my friend Ellie came to the shoot that week. And it was just one scene, but it was a really funny scene.
It's a very funny scene.
It's a great scene.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say that scene, it's interesting that you had that discovery in your performance style, because that scene is really dependent on strong moment-to-moment work. Like, everything that Mel does is something's happening and there's an immediate switch and an immediate switch. And if you're thinking too far ahead, you wouldn't be able to sell that.
Yeah. Mel was his name?
Mel Woodworthy.
Yes, you had a first name and a last name,
which is impressive for a single scene character.
Worthy. I totally would not have known that.
Oh, Mel.
Well, we have it all here. So this episode, Anything But Cured, aired March 14th, 1994. So we're in season 6. It was episode 21, directed by Lee Shallad Kamel, who's an amazing director. Yeah. I'd love to talk about you working with her, but it was written by Russ Woody, who we actually have interviewed on the show before. And he spoke very highly of you. And he was also mostly impressed because when you did Becker, you remembered him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That he had written this episode.
I remember Russ Woody. I remember him. I remember him. I guess he must have been in the room when I first auditioned. I don't remember those faces because I was focused on, doing my work.
Yeah.
Later on, I was, I liked him a lot. And, he was a good.
He writes some of our favorite characters.
Yeah. He tends to write very character specific stuff.
He was on Becker later. He was later on Becker. Okay. Becker was one of those shows at actually the year before the West Wing where I auditioned and they wanted me to be, I didn't even get a test deal. They just were offering me because it was, like 7 out of 13, 13 out of 22, whatever they did. And we were going to make a deal if they let me go and do movies, because that's what I wanted to do. And then right when we were making the deal, I said, okay, he needs August off because he's going to film in August. And they went, oh no, we need him in August. And so that deal fell through. So I didn't, and so I was lucky because Becker would have been the show that I was on. and West Wing wouldn't happen.
Oh, as a series regular. Oh, wow. Wow.
But I ended up going back as a guest star of some sort for a role that was very different but similar to the role that they originally wanted me for, and it didn't quite work. I remember it was a very odd experience in that regard. That role didn't work for me at all. But I really like them. They're really like Russ, and of course I like Ted quite a bit, and that whole cast back over.
Do you remember working with Lee? I mean, she's done so much television and one of the rare women to direct, comedy as well. Do you remember working with her?
I vaguely remember. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily struck that a woman was directing because this was one of my first sitcoms, so I didn't know how usual or unusual that was. So it didn't strike me as anything unusual. I just remember the Murphy Brown being a good experience, And I remember getting applause each time I exited, and we shot it.
Yeah, you do.
We always pay attention to when the uncontained applause happens on the show, the moments that the audience is really surprised and into it. And your exit is one of those where everyone clearly has to pause and wait because the audience is so thrilled by Mel finally making a decision.
Yeah. No, I remember it, and it happened like the second time we shot it. So I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And the only reason I remembered it is because I went, wow, Sheila and Ellie are probably really impressed. It was my girlfriend, my now wife, and my friend Ellie. I just remembered it as being really good experience, like from top to bottom. From the first moment I went into the room to audition, they were really nice, and which I appreciated in those days. And then the complete professionalism on the set for actors that I had watched and like admired, and I forget all their names, but are they all coming back to the?
They all are, except Charles Kimbrough, who has earned his retirement. There's word on the street that we might see him come in for a guest appearance.
Was he which one?
Jim.
He played Jim, the anchor.
Yeah,
the old school anchor.
Yeah, so Candice Bergen, who played Murphy, Joe Ragabudo, who played Frank, Grant Shaw, who played Miles, and Faith Ford, who played Corky, are returning.
They're all back.
Faith.
Yeah, and there's a couple of new cast members.
And there was another guy. Was he a recurring? Who was the other guy?
Well, there's either Eldon, who's the painter, or Phil, who ran the bar, and they are both passed.
No, it's a guy who's he was on that show, so maybe he wasn't a regular, and I can't remember his name. But he was.
I'm trying to think who else was in the episode with you.
What was his name? What was the painter?
Eldon.
Robert Pastorelli.
Robert Pastorelli.
Yeah.
Pastorelli. We did the first table read of Glengarry Glen Ross, the film.
Really?
Al Pacino and Jack Lemmon, and someone had seen me in a play and invited me to do the table read, which led to very close to doing that movie, and didn't quite happen. Years later, I ended up doing the play with Al Pacino, where he was playing Shelley, the Jack Lemmon role, and not Roma, the role he played in the movie. Anyway, I remember Robert Pastorelli, who I really loved on Murphy Brown.
Yeah,
he's a wonderful actor.
Incredible.
I feel like I've been asking a lot of questions.
Oh, no. Well, I actually wanted to just ask about how much you remember of Mel Woodworthy and why he was in the therapist office in your episode.
Not a lot.
So it opens with him talking about his wife trying to get him to just choose Chinese or Italian.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
He just can't decide.
Oh my God.
It's a very delightful episode, and what I love is I see a lot of your personality quirks. I think this is something that ties into the being told that you were the most honest person they'd had. It's such a real person. And watching you get shadowed, you get sandwiched between Candice Bergen and Joe Regabuto and the therapist all at once.
Somebody said they all barge into the and do I then throw a fit of some sort, or do I just?
You try.
Yes, you don't. There's too much fear in Mel, unfortunately, and he's unable to really make a real decision, which is where the comedy comes from.
Yeah. And then finally turns around, then you kind of ask Murphy for feedback, and if you're making the right decision, then you say, you don't care, and then you storm out, and the audience goes wild.
Yeah, and Deborah Mooney, I don't know if you remember, plays the therapist, who has an extended career on TV as well.
Who plays the therapist?
Deborah Mooney.
Deborah?
Yes.
Deborah Mooney.
She was on Everwood as a series regular. She's done tons of television.
She's one of those people you go, oh, yep, she's amazing.
Oh yeah. The names are terrible with names. I'm too busy noticing quirks in behavior, and I always, even if I say, I'm sorry, can you repeat your name again? I'm watching how they give me the name
Well, you're a director.
I always forget to hear the name. So I'm terrible.
I do too, and I when someone feels bad they don't remember my name, I always say, listen, I'd rather that you remember our conversation and what we talked about and me as a person than my name, because exactly you're focusing on what they're saying and just kind of goes out the window.
And the more information, the more data that's programmed into your brain, the slower it takes for the computer to work. And unless you use drugs to help, boot up your speed. And so when I get introduced now, when I'm at these functions, it takes me like, it's like I got to go through a file that's really thick. And people get upset that I don't, and I can't hide it. I look at them like I have no idea who you are. And then, like 2 minutes later, I go, "Oh my God, I remember."
Yeah, that happens to me too. Yeah. Well, I went to the actor studio, and James Lipton would just call everybody "kid."
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so
you just
everyone
pick
was
a
kid.
thing that you do.
Then I realized, oh, he doesn't know my name.
Archie called everybody Red. Red.
Well, I have a question that's a bit of a Murphy West Wing crossover, and it's something that we've discussed. One of the things that stands out to us, and we got very spoiled with as young TV watchers, was the very platonic friendship between Murphy Brown and Frank Fontana on Murphy Brown. And we also talked about the arguably platonic relationship between Toby and CJ from them. But we were wondering if you had any thoughts on Toby and CJ's relationship and how that...
To Candace and Frank?
The platonic male-female relationship in 90s television.
Yeah, so what we talk about is that relationship on television, even today, is very rare to have a male-female platonic relationship. And since there aren't that many, we actually reference CJ and Toby a lot
Quite
because
often.
It's the only one that we really have. So I guess what we're asking is if you might want to talk a little bit about, in general, platonic, relationships on television in reference to your own with CJ.
Yeah, I've not thought about that much, to be honest.
That's okay.
I keep thinking of Cheers, and every time there was an attempt for platonic relationships, they couldn't hold.
Yeah.
But where else would there have been some? Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's a good one. We didn't think of that.
Murray
And it's
and
Murphy.
Lou and Mary, Murray and Mary, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my go-to. That was my favorite TV show for many reasons, but mostly because it was on in New York from 1 a.m. to 2:30 in the morning in reruns.
Oh, that makes sense.
And I think it actually prevented many suicides, to be honest. I was always a night worker, whether I was driving a cab or working in law firms, proofreading or whatever. And then if I was directing a play, I would always take time out when doing my work at 1 in to watch an hour and a half, 3 episodes of Mary Tyler Moore. And I guess I never really thought about that. And with CJ and Toby, they had a special connection, and I think it was reflective of Allison and me, and how much we loved working with each other, and how much we connected offset. And we've always had a lovely platonic relationship. So I don't that we truly adore each other, and have no issues with that whatsoever. So. I know she really wants to see me in bed, but it's not going to happen.
You just can't help. You can't help your animal attraction.
And so on the West Wing, it didn't seem like a big deal to me, because they were coworkers and they had to forge a relationship that was productive and constructive. And I think what got in their way of the work was at times, maybe Aaron certainly picked it up and wrote it sometimes. If she was in trouble, she would come to me privately. Similarly, I think when I was in trouble, she somehow was the one that was available. But I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on it. I think it was just the way it was written. It was the way the construction of
Yeah. Well, it meant a lot to us.
It meant a lot to us, and I think part of it is, the ever present when Harry met Sally arguments about if it can be possible. But I think when we talk about representation, I think that was a relationship that wasn't often represented, and it was, I think, very, very validating for those of us who do have platonic, relationships, that we got to see that there, and it wasn't commented on. It just was a fact that we saw in front of us, and we got spoiled with Murphy and with Mary Tyler Moore and with The West Wing to see that, and we don't see it as much now. And
what about Friends?
I think it was something that was valuable.
Did they all sleep with each other in Friends eventually? Or?
Yeah,
pretty much.
They did, really?
Or tried to date. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even Joey and
Rachel.
Phoebe tried to date, I think. Oh, no, well, yeah, them too.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
it's been a while, though.
Seinfeld, even though they had a relationship early on, they were very clearly platonic friends the rest of the way, and she was...
Well, there was one episode where they tried it again.
They did try again,
But it didn't work.
But the fundamental definition
that's
of
true.
their relationship was platonic.
Yeah, it was. This was not going to be about a will they, won't they kind of scenario.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I'm sure there's more that we just didn't. I guess we haven't really thought it out.
that one's...
We're going to do a whole
that one's got to be my favorite one. What are their names? Jerry and
Jerry and Elaine.
And Elaine.
I do love their relationship. Yeah, it's great.
Elaine. She was so amazing. Well, she's amazing in everything, but she was amazing
Yeah.
in that role. Yeah.
So going a bit back to 1994. Now, your particular episode of Murphy Brown is a little infamous because Bob Newhart is in it.
Yeah.
I totally forgot that.
Well, you don't have any scenes with him.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they filmed it later, but her secretary is Marsha Wallace.
Yeah.
Playing her character from the Bob Newhart show.
Yep.
And then at the end of the episode, Bob Newhart takes her back to his job.
It's a great little crossover.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot that stuff. Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if maybe they may have filmed it maybe before, your scenes. I don't know.
They may have done a special filming just for Bob.
No,
But
I remember it all now. I don't remember meeting him, so maybe they filmed it differently, but I remember seeing it. I might have been just so, tunnel focused on my own stuff at that time.
And in pain.
Yeah, that's true.
Nerve-wracking, big sitcom, and wasn't necessarily a comic actor by definition, So, but now that you mention it, I go, oh my God, yeah, of course. And the secretary, she was a lovely character.
But do you remember working on Love and War that same year?
I remember that well because I was on that show when I got the beep on my beeper, which I had never owned before. It was the first beep I had ever gotten in my life. And I'm sitting, in those days, they put you in a little cubicle. Like they would stack cubicles where they would put the kind of lowly guest stars, not the real guests, the lowly ones like me. They were really like little prison like solitary boxes, like punishment, like holes. And, the beep went off and I jumped up and hit my head. That's all. And, my son was having my Sheila was having an emergency C-section. And I told them, because when this is why the stupidity goes out of your head when you get pregnant, because the male hormonal response to pregnancy is, I gotta go make money and I gotta go. So I was just at the movie City Hall in New York right before this. This came along and I was like, I'm gonna, but we might give birth this week. we'll figure it out. I gotta work. And sure enough, then they knew that Sheila was, imminent, or Gus was imminent. And, apparently I came back on set after getting the beat, and they all looked at me. They were rehearsing, and Bob Bollinger was the director, who I knew from theater in New York. So he was a friend, and he saw my face, and all the women, who was on that show?
Joanna Gleason.
Gleason, who I adore.
Yeah. Annie Potts.
Mm-hmm. And one of them, so Bob Bollinger goes, go, just go. We'll figure it out. Just go. Because they saw my face. They knew what was up. And I said, it's an emergency C-section. They said, go. And either Annie Potts or Joanna Gleason, and I don't know which one of them may or may not have kids, but one of them yelled out, I had a C-section. It'll be okay. As I was running out of the set, I heard it in kind of a Doppler effect. It was fading as I was going further away from it.
It might have been Joanna Gleason. I've met her son, and he would be about the right age for her to know that already.
I drove like a New York City taxi driver was to St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. And I guess I think we were in CBS Radford. And, made it. And I had one scene on that show, Lucky. It was, what's his name? Was the lead guy who just passed, sadly.
Jay Thomas.
Jay Thomas was very sweet. The radio guy, and he was a really sweet guy. And I had one scene, and I was like the insurance guy, and all I did was come on to the set on the bar and go, hi, I'm the insurance man, Bob. And that was, and I had a short little scene. It wasn't particularly funny. And it was when my son was born. Obviously it worked out okay. And you know how the modern delivery is. Everyone showed up. So there's all these people you have to deal with, friends, family, and everyone's passing the baby along. And so I'm trying to help get him on the nipple and all those kind of things you do. And I'm sitting, and every now and then I go, oh shit, I have to work tomorrow. And I would check because the next day was the shoot day, and I'd check my scene, and I go, I know that, it's fine. And then I've spent all night in the hospital, and we went home, I think, early in the morning, whatever. And then at some point I go to work, and we're shooting this thing. And I don't know if people understand the male response to this, to the actual birth, is that your brain empties out. Because you have a whole baby that's got to replace everything you think about in your brain. You now have to protect life. And that takes over. And so my scene was coming up, and there it was, and I looked, the cue light came on, and I looked at the cue light and I said to myself, I have no idea what I'm going to say when I go out there. And I went out there, I remembered something about insurance, and I go, hi, I'm the insurance man, Harry. And then I cut. It was Bob. And then I could not get right.
Well, it's actually Lester, so you still can't get it right.
What's that?
I was making a joke. His name is actually Lester, so I said you still can't get it right.
His name was Lester. There you go.
But Bob is funnier, honestly.
Actually, yeah.
Bob is
See
funny.
that? It wasn't funny. So,
listen, it was a long time ago. Don't worry about it.
So Bob Bollinger comes up to me after like 7 takes, and he goes, hey, you were really funny yesterday. Just do that. And of course that made me more nervous, and we had to let it go and shoot it again at 3:00 in the morning when everybody left, when the audience was. That's how.
Oh wow!
Now that's happened before. In those days. Who's the guy? My brain is a little fried right now. I'm on.
That's okay. Before we gotcha.
I have no coffee and no tobacco, and my brain doesn't function without those things. So I don't remember anybody's name. But who's the guy, the co-producer of Curb Your Enthusiasm, who plays his manager?
Oh, the one from the Goldbergs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, why can't I think of his name? Hold on. I'll Google it.
Yeah.
We all have the.
We're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, Google. Thank God for Google. Jeff Garland.
Yeah, Jeff Garland. So Jeff, I think I ran into Jeff at Shea Stadium in New York. I was doing a batting practice.
What were you doing at Shea Stadium?
I know I'm a Yankee fan, but
I was like, look at your
Sorry,
hat.
I also come from a Yankee family, so.
I was doing a batting practice charity.
Okay, all right.
Allowed.
Jeff, or I was there for a Met Yankee game.
Okay, that makes sense. I should have guessed that.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in the Yankee box, like right next to the dugout. And anyway, I see Jeff Garland, and I walk up to him and I go, "Hey man, I really, it's so much fun on Curb." And he goes, "Richard." I go, "What?" He goes, "Richard." I go, "You don't remember me?" And I go, "No, you were on my sitcom." When he had his own sitcom, and to this day he talks about it. We ran into each other at the upfronts, and we told the story to my wife in a bus going from the hotel to the upfronts, and he hated the show, and it wasn't funny at all. And I was new to this. It was one of the first jobs I got. It was before Murphy Brown by a lot. And I remember I got a BMW at an auction that a friend of mine convinced me to buy that didn't make it 4 blocks before it would break down. So I never made it to work. I'd always have to call them and they'd send a transpo to pick me up. And so they hated me just for that. And, I couldn't remember my lines because in those days, and it's problematic. It had made no sense.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember them. No matter how many times I went around the logic of these words, no human being would say them, even in a farce or a cartoon or a fantasy. And they weren't funny. So I couldn't, and the struggle of getting to work and being in this new environment, I'm on a set and being around people that are and it was surreal in a kind of bad dream sense. And, couldn't remember anything. And Jeff Garland went at Shea Stadium. He said, "You don't remember me?" I go, "No." He goes, "You were on my show. You didn't know any of your lines." I'll never forget it. It was one of the great days that I had on that show. No matter how many times we did it, you didn't remember anything. And, so that was another sitcom that didn't go well.
Now, didn't I hear that Allison Janney gave you a trick for line memorizing?
Yeah, Allison had this trick when she did Shakespeare of putting the first letter of every word, capitalizing it, and just writing the first letter, so that when you write that out, so to be or not to be would be TBONTB. So that when you saw it on the page, you would remember to be or not to be. And it doesn't work for everything. It works for things like Aaron Sorkin or Shakespeare or even a little bit of David Mamet sometimes because there's meter and there's poetry. Mamet's more like jazz poetry, but there's still a rhythm to it. And you can recognize alliteration or, patterns in the language based on seeing that first word. And that's how I learned. I did a one-man play once. It was maybe 7 minutes long. It was possible to learn, and I wrote it all out. And that took me about 4 days to just write.
Sure,
just
that's
write
a lot of text.
Was that Under the Lintel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that at George Street. You were wonderful in it.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
In New Brunswick.
Yeah, well, I used to work in when I was saving for grad school. I actually sold subscriptions in the basement of the George Street Playhouse. I'm from New Jersey, so it wasn't a large trip from the city to come in and see you. Plus, I had never seen you on stage, and I'd wanted to see it. It was a beautiful play.
We ended up taking it to London. We did it there.
You seem to work a lot in the West End. Is that just a coincidence, or do you prefer it over the New York stage?
Yeah, that's after the reviews came after that play that quite kind of special from what I hear. I never read them, but I was certainly told that. And And so I got offers to do the play all over the country, you know, and I said, no, I only want to do it in London. And I don't know why, but I just had in my head, I wanted to do it in London. And it, didn't necessarily happen until I was invited to do a golf tournament in Wales, which I was paid for. It was a kind of a Writers' Cup, All-Star Cup kind of competition between American celebrities and European celebrities. I still have very good friends from that 4 days in Ireland and in England, and that I still golf with and still see. But I also met a very young producer who just asked me, "What's your next thing? What are you doing next?" And I said, "Well, there's this play that I want to get done." And he goes, "Well, give it to me." And then he set up a meeting in London with a producer, also with I won't remember her name, but she's the big producer in on the West End. So I had just 2 meetings, and I met the big kahuna and didn't like her, and I loved the other producer. Carol Winters was her name. So it was golf that ended up taking me to London. But I love the audiences there so much. You know, like in New Jersey, I had a bad night or two, and yet the response was still a standing ovation, no matter what I did. I had heard the play was, you know, supposed to be great, and it's like they didn't pay attention, and it was weird. In London, the response was exactly proportional to the experience. On a mediocre night, some people would stand, you know, some people wouldn't. It was, you know, it was 3, you know, whatever curtain, the number of curtain. And then when it was great and it got more amazing as time went on for me and for them and for, you know, everyone involved, that play became a very, very important part of my life and progression for me as an actor. And, we had a rough opening night in London and hit a real bottoming out. And then but that kind of helped me understand the play more. And I can't explain it, but it became the most phenomenal acting experience I've ever had. And I connected to that audience in a way that I had never connected to an audience before. And I realized when they get quiet that they're actually still listening. Because I used to get nervous. I think opening night, everyone was so full of mink coats and, you know, there was 270 critics in the audience, and I wasn't, you know, I hadn't done a whole lot of theater. You know, I'd done enough, but I was directing in my 20s. I wasn't acting. So these opening nights were new. In New Jersey, I kind of forced my way through it and had a good night. And in London, I didn't have a good night. And, but I learned that the quiet audience is actually still listening, and the connection between me and them became much more intimate, and I trusted them more. And I went very, very dark and found a place that lifted me out of it. Anyway, the experiences became more and more kind of great. I don't know how else to say it. And the audience started to give me standing ovations, and then more of them would stand when it got better. Then it got mediocre, and half of them would stand. Then it got so phenomenal for me and for them that, you know, full standing ovations. And then when I would go out down the alleyway from the theater, the Duchess Theater, you know, people would be milling around, waiting for me to sign autographs or whatever. And on a mediocre night, they would just be hanging out. And when the show got kind of amazing, they would give me space from the gate. And then it got made another level, and there was a semicircle around the gate. And then I had a night which I didn't think was possible to exist. I think it was one of those, I flew from the first moment to the end and was continuing to fly in my dressing room going, did that just happen? I don't understand how that was even possible. Where I didn't have one self-conscious moment in the entire night. Everything was full flight at full speed, or the appropriate speed, I should say. And it was absolutely what you dream about. And I go outside and there's nobody down the alleyway. Am I dreaming this? Wait a second, did this happen? And I walked down the alleyway and they had lined up single file starting from under the marquee going around the corner. So even their behavior outside was, and I don't know if I go back to a mediocre night, they'd all be milling about outside. It was amazing to me that they paid no attention to whatever they read or whatever they heard. They're such an incredible audience because it's part of their lives. They go all the time that their response was so directly proportional to our experience together. And I really love that. So I go back. I have more friends in London than I do in Los Angeles. I love going out there. I love seeing other work there. I have a great time there. So I've done movies, TV, and if I was single and, childless, I would be living in town.
I really appreciate that. I'm part of a theater company, and due to the nature of how the shows work, has a bit more of an environmental feel to it. So there's an intrinsic relationship with the audience. And something that I find very beautiful about what you said is that we sometimes forget in theater that there's a very specific relationship with your audience that can reflect the performance and either elevate it or get in the way. And I think that's something that I miss a lot when I go to especially big New York productions, where there's kind of just an assumption that you're going to stand. There's an assumption that it's more of a commercial digestion of what we've seen. And I think being able to read your audience and let that feed your performance, finding that intimacy is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. And it's in that case, a little easier to accomplish because I was talking directly to them. They were part of the play. But I remember the first time when I was acting in that play, that farce that my acting class, we all produced together. And I remember being able to control how much the audience laughed. And that I experienced that in other plays that had humor in it. And I thought it was really important to maintain the trance by controlling how much they laughed and stopping them from laughing. And that feeling is very powerful and very, very kind of amazing. And I think, we make the mistake sometimes of just wanting a laugh. And that's a good sign. But I think it takes you out. It sometimes takes you out. This is part of the experience that always makes me wonder about that trance thing. I remember seeing the play Bent on Broadway. I knew the producer. I helped him with a show off Broadway called 40 Deuce, where that was Johnny Pankow's first. Kevin Bacon was a young actor in New York, and he was in that play. There were two versions of it. And anyway, he asked me about the casting of Bent and what I thought of Richard Gere and the part and blah, blah, blah. David Dukes played the other parts. Two homosexual prisoners in a concentration camp. And there's a scene where they have sex, only it's a scene where they're standing still. And the premise is that they're standing still for 10 minutes, and if they move, they'll be shot. That's the premise. And during that time of stillness, they talk to each other in a version of what you would call phone sex. They just talk to each other to orgasms, basically. That was in the play. And Richard Gere and David Dukes did. Now, Richard Gere, I actually really like the guy and think he's done some really great work, but he was grinding on stage. And, he was like getting into the sexuality of it, and he started to grind. And I was almost going to yell out, shoot him! Shoot what you set up. He should be shot.
Yeah,
Right
the
now.
given circumstances of the play, that's not okay.
Right. And so it's not, and David Dukes was very, very still, I have to say. But anyway, when it was over, there was big applause, for that scene. Big applause. And the guy in front of me goes, so much better than London. So much better than London. And I went, these guys do not have this audience. If you're applauding, the way, a particular moment is done, which they probably have read about, and this guy clearly had seen before, you've lost them. You're no longer telling a story. You're trying to show off. And, that happened, when I did Glengarry on Broadway. And we have to ask yourself, why are we doing Glengarry for the 39th time? Well, I got a chance to work with Daniel Sullivan and Al Pacino and Bobby Cannavale and so on. But I don't think we ever defined why we're doing this play. And in the end, actors want to do that play because they want to say, hey, you haven't seen the way I've done Ricky Mo. You haven't seen the way I've done. I get to do this thing. I get to do that thing. And the audience was applauding us when we made exits. And I was like, this is a disaster. This is not, when I first saw Glengarry, Glen Ross, originally, Joe Mantegna, and oh God, I know his son, the wonderful character actor. Remember the TV boss in Tootsie?
Oh, yes.
Not in Tootsie. He's not in Tootsie. It's the one with, Robin Williams playing the woman.
Oh, and Mrs. Doubtfire?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mrs.
Yeah.
Doubtfire, the TV producer
Oh, at the end, who hires him?
who hires him.
Yes. I can see his face.
Yeah.
And I'm good friends with his son. That's how bad my brain is. But anyway, where am I in the story? Help me.
Oh, so you saw that was the original production and how that affected you.
Yeah, and I was absolutely riveted from the beginning to the end. It was, and still people who hadn't seen the play before, they were riveted because the play is that good. But, when theater becomes, watch me do this, and, let me see him do this, then I lose interest in it. It's like, if you're going to do this again, find a way into it that's going to make them forget that they have hands and they should applaud in the middle of the thing. And there are some actors that get upset when they don't applaud when they see you on stage. I did a thing where I made it impossible for them to applaud. And it pissed off my acting partner because he wanted to get the applause. But I did a little thing so they couldn't. Because I wanted them to want to know what's going to happen next and not, let's see this, TV star. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I was just telling Lauren, and I know we need to wrap up soon, but the Tonys are tonight when we are recording this. I just got to go see the band's visit, and I was telling her that there is this moment that meant so much to me as someone who grew up in the theater, was watching Katrina Lenk, the lead of the production, do the song that I'm pretty sure they're going to perform tonight on the telecast called Omar Sharif. But it was one of those moments that I haven't had in a few years going to a show where I felt like I was the only person in the room watching what this person was doing. And it had nothing to do with who was on stage. It had to do with it was that trance moment, that moment where all of a sudden there was a spotlight and I was in it with her. And I was like, that's why I go. That's why I go to the theater.
Yeah, they have it in Hamilton, certainly.
Oh, yes. Oh, that happened to me several times in Hamilton.
Three of us are big Hamilton fans. I got to see it, I think like fourth preview at the Public.
Oh, wow.
So not knowing anything, just seeing that great video at the White House, and I was following it, and
that original performance of his. Yeah,
and I knew that it was coming to the Public soon, and long story. So it was so incredible to go into something with no expectation except for this little video from the White House, know nothing about it, and being so mesmerized that my friend and I we have to write everything down. Yeah, we don't want to forget any of this. Not having a soundtrack, or a cast album. Mm-hmm. People hate me for saying that. A cast album to remember. And it was, what theater usually is ephemeral, having that moment of not any sort of outside memory to take over the experience.
People often ask me why I don't watch myself on TV or movies and stuff. I don't watch myself when I do plays.
Exactly.
Good point.
What matters to me is how you feel coming off the set.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel like you've done everything you can, great. And if you didn't, why not? And how they messed it up. I just want to know, or how they make it great, better. So every now and then I'm curious about something, but usually it's the experience you have, acting that matters to me.
Very quickly, because we know we don't want to, we're almost probably out of time here, but sort of piggybacking back, this is such an amazing conversation, but quickly you can indulge us as West Wing fans.
Indeed.
I've always been fascinated, and again, we hope not to take anything away from West Wing Weekly, which one of the inspirations for us to do this show is I know you've talked about in the final season of the series that you believe that Toby is covering for somebody as the leak. We have our theories as to who we think he's covering for, but I don't know if you have come up with that backstory yourself, but I don't think I've ever heard you mention who you do think he is covering for.
Who do you think it is?
We actually both think that it's Andy.
We think it's Andy.
Who's Andy again? My
wife.
Your wife. The mother of the children.
Yeah.
Mother of the twins.
Kathleen York, who was...
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not going to ever say.
Okay.
I actually love that you're not going to say.
Yeah, that's great. I was always curious if that was a choice or just no one asked you.
They actually did ask me at some point because they kept writing, like I said I would do the scene where I say I'm the leak with CJ. First of all, I thought as horrible as the storyline was, that was a great scene.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, it is a great scene.
The idea of being silent for that many minutes, television show was kind of cool. But, the way I had dinner in England at the house of a writer for The Guardian. And his wife was also a journalist. And this was shortly after that aired. And they go, we decided that based on what we saw in your right eye during those moments with CJ, that you were telling her that you didn't do it. And that there was somebody else that was responsible. And it was like, I've never heard anyone like hone down the messaging to which eye they were getting it from.
It's an expressive eye.
It's really very lovely, actually. And they had actually studied the moment so much that they decided and they were right. That's exactly what I was communicating to her, which is cool that they saw that. In the end, I told them, because I would get scripts, I did it because, Toby, I did it because. And I'm never going to say that. I'm never going to say I did it because I didn't do it. So, don't write that. I'll say, this guy has a blanket of wool on it, if that's what you want me to say. But I will not say I did it because. So stop writing that. And yet they wrote it about 4 or 5 times. So finally, John Wells got frustrated and said, well, can you tell me your story? And I did, but it was convoluted because it didn't make sense. Right? The storyline, no sense. So my theory, or the only way I could go through the storyline was to know that I didn't do it. And that, so they were stuck in how to move forward. And they literally called me from the writers' conference in Hawaii asking me, why would Toby have done this? And I said he wouldn't have done this. But if he did, what would be the reasons? This is after they wrote it. And I said, there are no reasons because he would never have done it. But if he did do it, can you tell? And then I would have to, all right, fine. If he did it, first of all, it would have to be after 2 years of fighting with the president over it. And after he told the president that he was going to do it. and and 100 other things. But these would be his reasons. That's how painful it was. Those last year or two of the West Wing was really, really hard for me to do.
I was going to say that, going back to what you said earlier about working with Allison and their relationship. For me, that scene is all about the looks between the two of you when you say it.
Mm.
Like that's what makes that scene always stand out, is the relationship between the two of you.
Yeah.
It's gut-wrenching when you feel for these two characters, as we have, and I'm sure the audience has, because that's why we keep tuning in, is because we love these characters. I mean, also the great dialogue. But it's an emotionally wrenching scene to watch, let alone, I'm sure, to act in.
It's a great premise to have somebody make a confession, and then the rules of the scene, the rules of the moment are you're not allowed to talk.
Yeah. It's just painful.
You can't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't speak. No, well, says no one I would rather have done that scene with than Allison Janney.
And you can see that it's a masterclass for fellow actors to watch, because there's just so much happening. That is something that I, like you said, it doesn't happen that often on television. You get to do that on stage, because no one can turn the channel if there's nothing happening.
Yeah. But it's great.
And so it's a lot of trust.
What's great when it happens on television is that you can see it. You can see every little, like those writers in England. It's like, I can see from your right eye. It's hard just to do that from the balcony of the Broadway theater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Something else has to communicate that. Some larger physical action has to communicate that. But that's the pleasure of television, is that when the work is great, you can really hone in on behavior, and behavior can be very subtle and very particular and specific.
We get to go back and watch it again as well, and pick it apart, find those moments in your eyes.
Yeah, in the old days.
Yeah.
In the old days, we didn't have VCRs when I was young. VCRs was a big, and then it became such a pain in the ass. Then you wouldn't mark the tapes. I would never mark the tape. I didn't know which tape I had. And I mostly just taped sports, So, this idea of, I didn't grow up rewatching, things. So it's not in my DNA to constantly do that. But, I've done it for movies. I just showed The Godfather to my daughter. So that it had to, I knew every line, I knew every moment, I knew when he picked up the cat, when he dropped the cat back to put, put it back down. Every single moment of that movie from watching it so many times. It's kind of cool to be able to do that.
Well, you've been so generous with your time. Is there anything that you remember about your experience on Murphy that we haven't covered?
Then I'm guessing the food was probably pretty good.
Yeah, right? Good crafty.
Yeah, we've heard good things about the craft services at Murphy.
Yeah, the sitcoms always had the better. We were in the first year of the West Wing. Drew Carey was next door, and he would invite us over to partake in their smorgasbord, which was phenomenal compared to our donuts. He had all kinds of meat, fresh meats, and rye bread, and pickles, and slaw.
Look at the rye bread.
I don't. Maybe I should have seen the episode. But how can you see the episode? Can you see it? Can you find it?
That is the big problem, is because of licensing issues is the official word for the music, because of all the Motown on the show. The Murphy Brown is only out on DVD for one season.
You're kidding.
It's become a huge thing, and it's actually why one of the big reasons we kind of started the podcast, to kind of get it back out there, even though we knew the music rights were the issue. And
this was before we got into what is now the binge watching culture. This was before box sets were selling that well, and Murphy Brown, I think at the time, was a bit of a risk because the major demographic was a little older, and so now we're trying to prove, especially with this revival, which came up after we had started, but we really want to talk about how it is much like The West Wing, very relevant topically, and that we think it's worth putting that money in so we can get the rest of it out there.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that it hasn't happened already with the revival, but, I guess contracts are a different thing. We'll see. Once we get past season 1, we're going to be kind of like archaeologists.
That's kind of cool. I had a mustache, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you did.
You look very different. I think that's something that most people
Yes.
who know you from West Wing only will be very surprised.
Yeah.
You're very un-Toby-like. I think both scenes, by the way, are funny. I think you're very funny in Love and War.
Yes.
Both sort of,
Really?
yeah, I do.
You're very young and nervous in Murphy Brown. And it's very clean cut and put together. It's really fun
and
to watch.
you're very reserved in Love and War. Like, I would say, like, they're not definitely different characters, but in the same milieu in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly because knowing you, if people only know you from West Wing, I think that you're unrecognizable, which is a compliment, obviously, as an actor. But it's like you're a different person.
Yeah, no, I didn't know I was funny in Love and War. No one told me.
You were busy.
Again, yes, you were a little preoccupied. It was 3 a.m.
Busy beginning the journey with my son. Yeah.
Yeah, Love and War you can watch. It is on Amazon.
Yep. It's all on Amazon right now.
Yeah, except for one part where they replaced Joanna Gleason's singing voice with not her singing voice, which is sad.
She have a great voice. I've seen her on Broadway.
Yeah,
She's amazing.
She sings a copywritten song. And an example like with Murphy Brown, there isn't as much music in it, but she sings a copywritten song and they replace her voice with another song.
I don't. Yeah, all this right stuff is beyond my head.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Wonder Years had a problem, why it took so long for it to come out. There's a lot of temp music. Quantum Leap has a lot of temp music where they just take out the music and then it doesn't fit with the original idea of the creators because it doesn't go with the action. It's kind of sad.
And the era, I'm sure, as well.
Exactly. Well, in some of these, like Wonder Years and Murphy using all the Motown as a lot of times commentary about what's happening, you miss the snapshot of what it is. It really was. These were especially shows that was another character, was the music that underscored it.
Yeah. But who knew,
None of us knew.
Who knew that this was going to be a thing that you would sign off on? So
Another show that people keep asking me about, but that the few that saw it that remember, which is still my favorite character, which was Relativity.
Oh, so good.
yeah,
Would you remember that?
I do, yeah.
Around that time, wasn't it? It was around 90. No, it was 95 or 6. Because Gus.
Yeah, I think it's right. So we were laughing at the fact that you had a really good year. It was probably 93 actually, but in 94 you have 10 different credits, all from that single year, and I think that came after that one.
Yeah, I think it did too. It's funny how things meld in your brain.
I left. They let me go from Relativity to do The Lost World. There's a Lost World.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now, and so I've told Ed Zwick and Jason Kadams, Marshall Herskowitz, back then. This is now 22 years ago. Right? And I said, you have lifetime favors whenever you want them, because they lived up to their word, because I said I wanted to do film. And they let me go, even though they were loving the character, and because I only had like 7 out of 13 or 10 of those silly things they used to do. And now they wanted me in all their shows, and they reversed that and let me go for 10 weeks to,
Wow, that is,
Spielberg was loving my character. I ran into him in the elevator up in Eureka where we were shooting at the time. Because I'm loving your character. I'm thinking of keeping him alive. And all I could think of was, I gotta go back to Ed Zwick. And
you gotta kill me.
I said, when if you kill me off, then all bets are off, and that's gonna be great for your movie. And he said, you know what? You might be right about that.
It's pretty bad how you die.
Yeah, it's pretty
I
bad.
told Sheila, and Sheila goes, do you have any idea how much money we just threw away? And I went, shit, you're right. And so the next day at lunch, I said to Stephen, I'm rethinking this death thing. And he goes, no, it's great. I'm going to give you a hero's death. And that's how that death ended up becoming like me saving them from getting off the cliff and being torn apart by the 2 T-Rexes. It became a heroic death because he had...
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
All because you wanted to go back to work.
Same time as Relativity, and it was a lot of stuff going on for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I checked it. So Relativity was 96 to 97. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us. We've admired your work for a while, and it's been a real pleasure.
But you guys have been great. Thank you so much.
Nice meeting you.
You guys too. Bye-bye.